Hello and welcome to the Athletic Soccer Show's post-World Cup review or post-day review at the World Cup. I'm Jack Collins and I'll be your host, and I'm joined by the Athletic's very own Peter Rutzler. How you doing, Peter?
I'm all right, thank you, Jack. I've enjoyed another day of football. I'm glad it picked up towards the end of the day. You know, it was a very, very slow start. A bit worried, but yeah, glad the last two games delivered, at least on the goal front.
Yeah, and on the drama front as well. I
Mm.
thought they were entertaining games, across the board. I thought, it started, as you say, a little bit slowly, but they were a bit sort of more of chess matches to start things off. And we got into the chaos in that Portugal-Ghana game and finished with obviously seeing Brazil and Serbia. We've seen everybody now, Pete. So before we go straight into the chats about these games, just a quick one to say, who have you been most impressed by? Every team has played now.
Yeah, I mean, well, the obvious go-tos for being impressed are Saudi Arabia and Japan. I think, there wasn't. I don't think there was. I don't think there should have been as much surprise about Saudi and well, to a more extent Japan maybe, because of how well they've been playing. But the result was phenomenal. I think seeing Germany struggle, of course, was a surprise. I think England really, the way they dismantled Iran. I know there was a lot going on with the Iran camp. There's a lot on their minds, and I'm sure that's played a part. But considering how other games have developed, I think that's a really encouraging start, a really good way to go, and probably France would say the same. With Giroud getting those goals, particularly with the injuries and Benzema being out. So, I can't believe I'm saying that. England, been impressed.
Yeah, England, France, Spain, obviously the big ones.
But Spain, of course.
I think we'll look at Brazil now, and we'll start with Brazil against Serbia, a 2-0 win for the Brazilians. This might go down as my most impressive performance so far. Not necessarily because I thought Brazil were all that, but because this was a relatively convincing victory over a team who I rate relatively highly, even if Serbia weren't at their best today. They probably had the hardest task of anyone on paper in terms of an opening game, and they have sauntered through it. It was 2-0. This could have been 4 or 5 towards the end, because as the game opened up and as Serbia had to go for it, Brazil started to carve out opportunities, hit the woodwork twice, a couple of big missed opportunities. It just felt like Brazil started to cook towards the end of this game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what's impressive is how they reacted to that first half, because I don't think, well, considering the pressure, considering the build-up, even just to the game, the atmosphere in the ground, you could see it. You could see everyone's been waiting for Brazil. It's the final game of the group stage. There's so much anticipation, and that builds. That does build. And when you play a first half like that against a really determined, organised, pretty well set up Serbia team, I thought that first half was theirs. Really, they controlled it in terms of the direction of the game. That's how you'd want it to go. But the way they responded in the second half, they found that moment of quality. They kept their heads, they kept their cool, they kept their discipline and their shape, and they got their moment. They got that moment of with Richarlison, great goal scoring poacher's finish, and then a moment of quality. And then after that, Serbia try and go for it, and they're opened up. But I think you're right. I think it was very impressive. Less so in the fact that they ended up with a Spain scoreline, but more in the way that they responded in game, and that bodes really well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke about Richarlison, and obviously he got both goals. The first, to say, is one of those finishes that you expect a player who is going to be that number 9 figure to score. But the second is a piece of genuine quality, probably the best goal we've seen so far. I would probably hazard a guess on paper as it is. And it's one of those where it's off the train. If someone did that in training, you'd be like, that's a good goal. But to do it on the pitch, to do it in a World Cup opener, it's quite something else.
That's the Brazil we want to see, isn't it? And I think you're right. I think technically speaking, that's got to be up. That's got to be the best goal of the tournament so far, and a big boost for him as well, because I know he's been scoring regularly for Brazil, hasn't he? So I feel like the questions come more from the outside than they do from probably inside. But to get those goals, it's the best way to start as a striker. You want to get off the mark, want to get off and running, and he had been pretty quiet, to be honest, especially in that first half.
Yeah.
Hadn't really been in the game, and you did sort of wonder, is this working? But as good strikers do, once the chance comes, you take it. And I think the movement for the first one, he reacts so quickly. I mean, it's a really good save from Milinkovic-Savic, but it's in that area. It's who's going to react quickest, and he's lightning fast, so sharp, and yeah, it's a brilliant goal. But the second one, magic.
Yeah. I mean, look, Vinicius Junior, I thought was very, very lively when he got the ball, and actually Serbia started with service, I thought, quite well in the first half. Really shut down those channels for him to be getting the ball. He started to open it up a little bit towards the middle of that second half. Neymar was here and there, but relatively quiet. I thought Rafinha was a little bit weak on the other side, but I think maybe the person I was most impressed with in this Brazil squad was Casemiro, who did a wonderful job of kind of everything in the middle. And obviously, we expect him to break up play. We expect him to do those kind of defensive six duties that he's done all his career. But his passing range was exquisite today. He hit the bar as well, or that cross section of post and bar that we like to see. And I just thought the whole thing was wonderful for him today. A player just continually showing his class. And there were question marks, I think, from some quarters when he signed for Manchester United this summer to be like, oh, have they signed someone who's passed it? Why have Real Madrid let him go? He continues to answer those critics pretty much every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, with a slower start, that sort of bedding in period under Eric Ten Hag, the questions start to mount. And, and as you say, have Real Madrid moved him on because he's at that age? But, this was a commanding performance. Double woodwork strike as well. So yeah, it was a complete performance. And I think you're right. I think Neymar was quiet. I think he was the most fouled. I think he was fouled like 9 times. I was doing a live piece and we were discussing that in the group. And I think that's the most of anyone in the tournament. So as you would expect, and I'm sure as he anticipated, but when you have your player who was your star man, the man that everyone's looking to is marshaled. And I thought, Lukic did really well in there. Goodell did well as well alongside. I thought they were quite good as a two. When he's out the game, it's the others that step up. And you said Vinicius stepped up big time on that left-hand side. And that's, especially in the second half, it just opened on that side, didn't it, the floodgates. And I suppose if you're Serbia, you're looking at that game and you're thinking, okay, first half, that final ball wasn't good enough for the main man, for our striker who didn't have a shot. That was probably the biggest drawback. One of those lands on his head, then maybe, and you'd trust him to take one. But it's in that second half where things go against you and suddenly you're going for the game. Dusan Vlahovic is off the bench. You've got 2 up top and the gap's open and you've kept it tight. So I think in this group, because this group is tight, isn't it? I mean, goodness, those upcoming games, the second round of games, and you start looking at that last Serbia-Switzerland game and it just, the heat on that seems to rise, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does feel like that's going to be a massive one. I mean, let's talk about Serbia, because I think saying that they didn't show up would be unfair, because it didn't feel like that. There are a couple of key players missing. We've seen Serbia for so long line up in that shape that has 2 strikers, Tadic behind them, Kostic on one side. We're expecting this Serbia to be the one that comes out of the blocks. Now, I wonder if, obviously there are injuries here. Vlahovic is just coming back from a groin injury. There's question marks over Kostic as well. But I wonder if Serbia will look back at that and go, maybe with a full strength squad, we could have made a better go of that, of getting those deliveries into the box to challenge Brazil. Because, much as these are, quality players, and I will have no word said against Thiago Silva, so that's not what I mean here. But it's Thiago Silva, it's Alexandro, it's Danilo, it's Marquinhos. This is not a youthful back four. And actually, when you look at it and you go, is there space to get in behind these fullbacks, who I still don't think are particularly brilliant, who I don't think I think, to be honest, are the weak link in this Brazil side. It didn't feel like any moment where Serbia really attacked those flanks and got the better of them. And I wonder if that will be something they look back at and, with an inch of regret, perhaps.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it's that tactical decision, really, isn't it, of playing Vlahovic, playing the 2 up top, as you say, or adding that extra body in the middle. And when you look at the first half, I don't know, we might disagree on this, because I actually thought Serbia had good control of the game. They may not have created the chances, but they had control of the game. It's just they lack quality in the final third. It was the deliveries from out wide were not great. Mitrovic didn't have a chance. And that's what you will regret. You go, well, if we had been better in the final third, we may have created the chance that could have changed the dynamic of this game. Because Brazil, at that point, as we were discussing earlier, there's pressure when they go in at halftime, and they didn't capitalize on that. So that's a different one. You're losing, not having Kostic was a blow, because we've seen how well he's been playing this season for Juventus. I thought Mladenovic came in and did okay. I thought he was very good. I think defensively they were fine. And it's just that balance, isn't it? That was a dilemma for Stojkovic, I suppose, coming into the game. It's, do I tighten it up in midfield with Neymar in there? bring in Lukic, put him next to Goodell, push Milinkovic-Savic if we need to push someone forward to get closer to Tadic. But then you lose something in the final third, and ultimately that's what happened. And Brazil had enough quality in the second half to overcome them.
Yeah, it did feel that way. Let's roll it onwards, shall we, to Portugal against Ghana. Now, the most chaotic game of the day. Very much enjoyed this. It's worth pointing out, if you have questions about any of these games, leave them in the comments and we'll do our best to get around to as many as we can. But this was a bit of madness because it swung from one way to the other, Peter. And at one point, Portugal 3-1 up, making the substitutions. You go, game is over here. And then there is a moment in the 99th minute where Iñaki Williams could and probably should equalize for Ghana. I mean, what did you make of it apart from it being beautiful chaos?
I mean, he's got to check his stud lengths, hasn't he? I mean, how's he slipped there? The vital moment, more last minute pain for Ghana. I mean, they trademark that stuff at the World Cup, don't they? No, it was an interesting game because I felt like, Ghana, we know their vulnerabilities. And, coming into this game, it was the Ronaldo show. I'm sure we'll talk about him a bit more, but that's just Portugal at the moment, isn't it? You either get caught up in the tide or you try and swim against it. And I think they just had to swim with it. And, in that first half, Ronaldo had his chances, missed those chances. You're thinking, well, where's this going here? Where's this going? Then the penalty. And I feel like that really disturbed Ghana quite considerably. And it would, because for me, it's not a penalty. And
I can see why it's given, and I can see why it's not overturned. But I think if it went the other way, it equally wouldn't have been changed. There have been some decisions like this in Europe this season, where I think if they'd not been given, they wouldn't have been overturned one way. But I can see why it's been given.
Yeah. I'm more on the borderline of not a penalty / grey area that VAR can either decide or not to decide to get involved in. But it was given, and yes, you can see what the referee has seen, I suppose. But that changed the dynamic, and we know that Ghana aren't the strongest coming into this tournament. They don't have the strength overall, but they got back into the game. They had that moment where they got level, and then it felt like the changes they made impacted the team. Taking off Ayew almost instantly, you get that response, and I think that's and then it swings again, doesn't it? Because Portugal take control, as you said, they get 2 goals up, and then inexplicably Ghana are back into the game again. So for all that they were good, Portugal, I thought Bruno Fernandes was very good in terms of his decision-making, his passing. You can see the influence he had on the game. There's crazy moments. I felt like the fullbacks in particular, we know their qualities in advanced areas, but defensively they were got at today, and Ghana exploited them. And
I don't think they got. Yeah. I don't think they got into the areas going forward. In fact, I've marked both fullbacks down. I thought they both had poor games. Cancelo, in particular, looked defensively vulnerable, which is not something we've really said. But Guerreiro never got into the game. And actually, considering he got the nod over Nuno Mendes, it does feel like that was a big opportunity for him to go, right, I can stake a claim here at the World Cup. And that performance would have done nothing, I don't think, to try and give Fernando Sanchez the confidence to give him another go. And I think Nuno Mendes is probably a better all-round defender, full stop. But, that's an opportunity for Rafael to go, right, yeah, okay, hand up. This is why you can't drop me. And he failed to really do anything with it. I was interested by this Portugal team. Now, it's not miles off what they played in that last warm-up game against Nigeria, where they won 4-0. But we've always seen Portugal play with this double pivot. Fernando Sanchez has been famously defensive, famously kind of pragmatic by playing 2 defensive midfielders. It's often William Carvalho and Ruben Neves together. He kind of let that go a little bit. Otavio and Bernardo played as 8s. Then Bruno Fernandes kind of floated around in front of them. I mean, Bernardo kind of played everywhere. So I'm not sure. He was picking up the ball from the centre backs. And I don't know if that was to do with Ghana's excellent shape or the fact that it was also he just needed to get on the ball and they were the only places he could pick it up. João Felix kind of drifted around off Ronaldo. Fernandes sort of drifted around on the other side. It was a more attacking Portugal on paper than we've seen, but actually when it came to what they did on the pitch, not much had necessarily changed.
I suppose we've had that dilemma about Portugal for a while in terms of the personnel they put on the pitch and then the outcome. I think you're right, and it's probably reflected by the decision at left back as well. You know, if you're playing Guerrero, that reflects the mentality. They've clearly looked at this game and thought, right, we need to take this to Ghana. Quality wise, Portugal are 2-3 leagues above them, and you've got to take advantage of that, and you've got to have that the right balance. And it didn't feel like it had the right balance on the day, as you said, in terms of the players' movements, in terms of the pockets that they would pick up. I mean, especially in terms of Felix as well. I mean, he scored a great goal. I mean, it's Fernandez's pass is good, and it should be cut out really. And you know, those sort of defensive lapses, and that's what you have, and it's good for him confidence wise. But you just wonder with sometimes with the way they set up in terms of it always is very fluid. It always feels like there's that rotation, and that can work against you when you don't have that clear system, that clear identity and way of playing. And you know, overall they were good, especially in the forward areas. The quality's there, we can see it. But it did in a way feel like a sort of you put Ronaldo through the middle and we'll play around him and see if he'll deliver for us. And ultimately he did, but you know, it took a few missed chances as well.
He took a few goes.
Yes,
I do still wonder if we'll get that open play goal in this World Cup. I know that's one of those bets that's been flying around. Ronaldo scored 0 open play goals at the World Cup, and he had 2 absolutely golden chances to bury the argument first and foremost in this game, and failed to do so. Portugal conceded twice. We're looking at this and going, yes, the front line's good. Rafael Leao came on, I thought, and was excellent. And Mike, who's a producer on this show, texted me halfway through the afternoon before he came on saying freely out. And I agree. It was one of those. He suddenly came onto the pitch, and Portugal looked so lively down that left all of a sudden. Now, obviously, the game was stretched at this point because Ghana were trying to force a way back into it. But his influence and the impact that he can make, obviously, that's his first international goal. But you can just see the defenders are terrified of him. And at that point, it does feel like when is Fernando Santos going to let him run free? When is he going to let him have the opportunity to make the difference from the start of a game? And I still worry that we won't see that at all this tournament.
Yeah, there's always the risk of that. But you could see the impact he had in terms of just providing some width, really, some actual out and out width, really homing in on that left hand side, and that's where they got a lot of the joy and got the goal as well. I mean, there's not that much more he can do other than probably knock a little harder on the manager's door, or I don't know what you can do at this point. But look, it's encouraging longer term for Portugal to have a player like Leao in this kind of form. Obviously, that doesn't really help when you're at the World Cup. You want the best outcome now. But yeah, I mean, if he keeps making those kind of cameos, the questions will continue to be asked. And you know, if Ronaldo doesn't get his penalty, then you know, maybe that changes the thinking overall on that front line.
No, but congratulations to him for being the first to score at 5 World Cups. It's a hell of an achievement, however you feel about Cristiano Ronaldo's place in the Portugal team right now. I just wanted to a couple of words on Ghana because I thought Mo Kudus was exceptional today, moving between that sort of midfield and attacking role. It was an interesting setup. Ghana obviously transitioned to a 5 at the back. We've seen it a little bit. They trialed it in the second half of a game against Brazil earlier this year, but mostly we've seen Ghana in a pretty solid 4-2-3-1 shape. So for them to change and move into this was a pretty bold call, but it worked for long periods of this game. Again, you know, a little bit like Serbia in that first half, they had the control that they were looking for. It did feel like they were in a place in the first half where they'd kept Portugal at relative arm's length. And it was only when the game started to open up and they started having to go for a little bit that they really got caught. But I wonder if this is the last time we see this shape, because you'd think now that they've lost the first one, and also considering this group and considering what we saw in the Uruguay-South Korea game, which we'll come on to, I don't think Ghana have any reason to be scared of anyone.
No, that's the point, isn't it? It's the fact that you're playing two teams coming up now that won't possess the attacking strength that Portugal did, and to play, you know, as you say, in a changed system and to do as well as they did is where you take the encouragement. I still think they're vulnerable. I mean, that's really the frustrating thing, is that you can't really say that it was out and out quality. I mean, there was a fantastic run by Leao for his goal and Fernandez's passing, of course, but I feel like those goals are avoidable, you know, and yeah, a lot of that is the response to the penalty and whatever. But that's that's the frustrating part. But in terms of their setup, I think you're right. I think it did give them a good balance, give them good control. It's something they can turn to later in games if they can get ahead and want to secure and see out leads. I feel a lot of people were writing off Ghana coming into this tournament. I don't think Ghana are particularly fancied, particularly if the sides have come out of Africa for the World Cup, and to come in and to play like that, particularly first half, to respond as well, to show you have that quality in the final third is what matters. I think that's probably one of the big questions as well for them was how they would do up top. And yeah, it was good you mentioned Kudos, because I was going to mention him as well, because I thought he was excellent. I thought it was really, really good, his movement, the way he was able to get forward and link the play. I quite like Ayew in a deeper role. I don't think Ali McCoy's did, but I thought it was fine. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot for them to go at. I mean, they're limited in what they have, but you've got to be as flexible as possible, and they will, as you say, they'll definitely take encouragement from the game earlier in the day.
Well, they scored Africa's first goals at this World Cup, and so that's something to take away at the very least from this performance. And the second one in particular, a goal that really did feel good at the time. But I was hoping that they'd get a third. So here we are. Right, let's move on to the other game in this group: Uruguay 0, South Korea 0. This wasn't the liveliest game in the world, and I think that sometimes 0-0s get unfairly painted as dull. But this one, it started off relatively brightly and fizzled out quite hard and only really came back into life in the last sort of 10, 15 minutes. It was one of those games where the middle segment really, really dragged, I thought. Let's start with Uruguay. Uruguay can't play Luis Suarez if they want to progress in this tournament. And I really hate saying that. One of my favorite ever players and one of the World Cup's greatest dramatists, right? Like a player who has thrived on these stages, making things happen for right or for wrong. And such a character, in that regard, but major buts everywhere. Like he is just not quite up to playing at this level anymore. And he was completely and utterly bypassed in this game today.
Yeah, he just didn't get involved in the game at all, as you say, particularly in that sort of first half. And I suppose that's the challenge Uruguay face, blooding through the newer generation, knowing when to move on, when to not, because conversely, Cavani's been pretty good for Uruguay. And it's trying to get that right mix. And as you say, it feels like for Suarez, it feels like the moment's passed, and it's how you get the most out of the next generation. How do you get more out of Darwin Núñez, who I felt spent too much time drifting into those wider areas, wasn't as effective, and we see that a little bit for Liverpool at times as well when he plays centre forward, and you want him in those spaces in the middle. You want him to be your target, because just to bring players up the pitch, and I actually felt that was an issue for both teams. I was trying to think of an analogy to describe it, but it was like playing with one hand behind your back, but out of choice, and then trying to fight someone with the other hand, but a meter apart. So you're sort of just scrabbling at them like that. It was a game where neither side were really willing to take the risks to create the overloads that they needed to get those opportunities. And when you have a setup like that from both teams in those kind of blocks, then it's going to be difficult for someone like Suarez. But the Suarez of old would have created something out of nothing, would have found those spaces, would have dragged the ball up the field in a way that would allow others to get forward, and he would take those chances. And when he doesn't, then you look elsewhere, and if no one else is doing it, then that's a problem. And, with Korea, Son's not fit, is he? So he wasn't able to have the same kind of influence. But for Uruguay, I think that's a considerable issue.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where you can chuck Luis Suarez onto the pitch for 10 minutes at the end of a game if you need a goal. And you might get the best out of him because you're pushing up and you've got the ball in those areas. But in the kind of game that we saw today, which was relatively spread out, which didn't have all that much going on in either box, that's never a game that he's going to thrive in at this age and, at this point in his career. And, you look at Edinson Cavani and agreed, he's also probably slightly on the twilight side of this team, the side you'd rather not be on.
Not slightly, he's very much there, but yeah.
But he is also still playing for Valencia in La Liga. He is very much and still has been a part of that team and has scored goals in La Liga this season. This is a very different setup. I know that Luis Suarez has done the romantic thing and gone back to South America and won a championship, and that's incredible. And I'm absolutely over the moon for him. But I think you could tell just the fact that he wasn't quite on the the game level that the rest of his team were. And when you have a player around him like Fede Valverde or Darwin Nunez, who throw themselves into everything, or are among the most energetic players that you can have, I think that contrast becomes incredibly stark. And actually, that's where I think it fell down a little bit for Uruguay today. I would wonder if maybe the move is to go Darwin through the middle, to play Fede Valverde in that right-hand side role, as he does for Real Madrid at times, and maybe just put someone like Nicolas de la Cruz or Giorgio de Ascheta on the other side, just to kind of give it a little bit more balance, and then utilize the midfield threes that we know the Uruguay have absolutely tons of. We saw obviously Vecino, Bentancur in there today. You can bring in Lucas Torreira, you can bring in Manuel Ugarte. There's a lot of players here who you're like, okay, you'll be fine in a midfield three and you'll work your socks off for this team. So I wonder if they need that. South Korea, I thought, were okay without being excellent. I thought they dominated the early exchanges. I thought they put together some nice passing moves, but again, sort of a lot of huff and puff with very little thrust in the final third, I thought.
Yeah. Same analysis for me. I think they, as I was saying earlier, I think they lacked that sort of ambition. I think both teams did really, and I think you're right on Uruguay. You've got to play to your strengths. I do like Valverde in there. I thought he was so influential today, and that's probably the toss-up, isn't it? Whether you want to sacrifice that if you're not getting it from your Suarez in front of him, or move into those wider areas. But you've got to play to your strengths, and South Korea weren't really able to do that. They have some good technical players, particularly in wider areas, supporting Son, and we didn't really see enough of that. We didn't really see enough of them committing bodies, forcing overloads, particularly in those wider areas. And it's Uruguay are a hard team to break down at the best of times, but you never felt like Diego Godin was tested. I think there was one of the questions: can he still do it at this level? And international football is different. You can sit
no
a bit
idea.
Deeper. Well, yes. Still not sure, are we? I suppose. And teams will sit deeper, but they never really tested him. They never really caused any. Didn't ask the question. If you don't ask the question, then you're not getting any answers, and it leaves us scratching our heads and wondering how he's going to cope when he faces Ghana.
Yes, well, maybe Inaki Williams will ask him more questions. In fact, I'm pretty comfortable that he will ask him more questions. Right, let's finish with Switzerland against Cameroon, which Switzerland won 1-0. It was a tough one, this, for Cameroon, because I thought, by and large, they were the better team, created the better opportunities, especially in the first half, and were undone by a Breel Mbolo goal, which he refused to celebrate because, famously, he was born in Cameroon. Scoring, I've seen the non-scoring against my club celebration at club level, but I don't think I'd ever seen it at international level before. So that's going to be an interesting one. Perhaps if Declan Rice scores against Ireland at any point, he won't celebrate.
Or maybe Anthony Robinson against England. Maybe we'll see that. Who knows?
Yep.
I mean,
or Yunus Musa.
We can go through the list. I think you're right. I mean, Switzerland, man, they just reek of competence, don't they? They're just the most competent team. It's just efficient, get the job done, not very exciting, but organized. And you just know they're going to be all right. They're just dripping in competence. And that's the difference. I agree. I thought Cameroon created the better chances. They just didn't take them, especially in that first half. There was high hopes for Choupo-Moting coming into this tournament. He gets the nod over Abubakar. You think, okay, there's the opportunities, they come, and then he's denied by Jan Sommer when he's in on goal, and that's the difference, isn't it? Especially in a competition like the World Cup, you just when your moment comes, you've got to take it. And they didn't. I thought Sommer was good, but like the rest of Switzerland, he did have a good performance, but he's always been good. But like Switzerland are always competent. There are some staples that always happen, and that's what's happened here. I thought Toko Akambi missed a big chance as well. Really should do better on the follow-up. But again, it was that first half. And I think the concerning element was after Switzerland scored, particularly late in the game, they really struggled to build any attacks. They really struggled to create anything. The answers weren't coming from the bench. It didn't really seem to be coming from within the team on the field. And when you're in that situation, you're not actually building any attacks. Switzerland are fine and resilient, but they just didn't create anything, as in they weren't able to get the ball into good areas either. And I think that was a big concern for me.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. They reek of competence, and I don't have major favourites and people that I don't like, but I don't like watching Switzerland. I've travelled twice to watch Ireland play Switzerland and watch just get done 1-0 and like them Switzerland keep the ball for 10 minutes. I felt for Cameroon. So I was like, I've been in your position. I've been in this stadium watching them keep the ball for 10 minutes in the last 10 minutes while we run around chasing shadows. It's incredibly frustrating. But yeah, it's just one of those. But Cameroon, there were question marks over how they were going to play. I wondered if Vincent Aboubakar was going to start after his comments about Mo Salah. Mo Salah must have been smirking in the background after he saw he'd been dropped for Brian and Mbeumo out of Brentford. A real moment for him there. But yeah, I thought Anguissa was good. I thought Castillejo was good. There were a lot of very impressive performances in this Cameroon side. Just no real final touch of class to get things over the line. And maybe that will come as they get later in the tournament and everyone gets a little bit more used to it. We know Choupo-Moting's been scoring a lot of goals at club level. He's coming into this tournament on flying form. So, yeah, they go again now. And it's going to be, well, they've got Serbia next, so it's hardly going to be easy. But you'd imagine that they're going to cause some problems for teams across the course of this. And I wouldn't write them off just yet, although I think that their chances are now severely limited by this loss.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with Group G, isn't it? Just the nature of the teams behind Brazil. Brazil are Brazil, but Serbia are a good team, especially what they've got in forward areas. Cameroon look good today in terms of the chances they create. There's quality there. I think Brian Mbeumo is a good addition. I think Samuel Eto'o has done his work there and he's given the team a good lift, a good alternative option. Was really sharp, really lively today. Yeah. Anguissa was very good. I've only ever seen him really play well apart from in that sort of second half of the Fulham season, but we won't go into that.
No.
There's the ingredients are there. The ingredients are there. It's just sometimes in games where things are difficult, you need that extra edge. You need that either the right tactical idea, that right way of playing, the right alterations. And I just didn't see that in the second half. And that's where I'd be slightly concerned. And Switzerland are just Switzerland, aren't they? I mean, this sounds like we're being quite vague.
They're going to get to the final. Sam Ty called this. He said we're going to get to the final, and at the moment I can't write it off. Yeah, but like they're just are they just going to beat everyone 1-0 apart from Brazil, and then they'll get to the final and meet Brazil again and lose? Like, that'd be the tournament. See you later.
No, please.
It would hurt me, but I wouldn't be surprised. And on that painful bombshell, I think we're going to call it a day. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Peter Rutzler for joining me.
No, it's been good fun. I'll see you again soon, Jack. I know you've been very busy, so let's keep it up. Should be fun.
Absolutely. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about the England-USA game with a host of guests. So I'm very excited about that one. I've been Jack Collins. This has been the Athletic Soccer Show World Cup post-game. Thank you so much for watching as ever. We'll see you tomorrow.